Yeah, exactly. Okay, so, I'll start recording.
So you record it,
well.
so I don't need to record it.
No.
Okay, good. All right. Very good.
Right, that's why. Okay.
Thank you, Enrica, and thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm not teaching this term. I do most of my teaching. Hey, Rav, how are you? Still Rav, no? Rav, still. You haven't changed your name. Not yet. You're aspiring to change it when you say not yet. Okay, all right. So I know him from another class or two. I do most of my teaching intensively in the spring and in the summer. And then I do other things. But I still communicate with the students on a daily basis with Skype and phone calls and so on. Okay, so let's see who we have in the class first, okay? Which programs are you in? I assume most of you are in CTL?
Yeah, most
of you are CTL. Who is not in CTL? Okay, and so you are in?
Higher ed. Are you right? Higher ed.
Higher ed. Yes, we need tall benches to talk to them. Higher ed, and you are in?
I'm in SG.
Okay, and someone else in another program? No? Okay. And why are you taking this class?
Well, this class is a kind of special
required
one.
Class.
Is a required. I hope that not everybody takes it. In fact, it's not required for everybody. It's just required for PhD and MA students, but we also have people who are not either, and
so,
decided.
Who are the MA students? Right? The PhD students? The others? And what are the others? MED or?
Plus, we have invited guests, so students who are not enrolled in the course, but
they can come as well. Good. And we have people here
exactly.
Also. Reza, what are you in? He cannot talk to us.
Yes, you can.
Reza.
Just unmute your mic.
I'm a PhD student in CTL.
Where are you, if I may ask?
Sorry?
Where are you?
I'm in Iran right now.
Okay, all right. Tehran.
Yes.
Okay, nice to meet you, Reza.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Okay, so I sent you the abstract. Did you read it? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So, you know, I don't have a formal presentation, all right?
So at least they didn't know, but they just discovered.
I told you in the abstract there will be no formal presentation. So, but I don't mind talking. Ralph knows that. So, I will have some points to say in the beginning, and I will read some of my literary work, and we'll create a conversation. And you can feel free to stop anytime. You can make comments. You can ask questions of any kind. There can be the kind of question, what do you think about this? And then I have to speak as if I am coming from the oracle, all right? Or you can ask another kind of question, like what does this mean? Or will you tell me more about this? Or I don't agree with you on this, which is fine. I will not eat anyone, okay? No. So that is my plan. We have until about 6:30, right, Enrica?
Yes,
okay.
with the dialogue.
I also sent you 3 readings. One is a short interview that was done with me recently after my recent publication when I was in Malta. And then there are 2 other co-authored articles. One actually published a while ago, 2002, but still one of my favorite articles. And the other one published recently with Suda Holadi, who was a postdoc from Iran as well, and finishing her postdoc term this year. Okay. I like to write articles with other people. In fact, I am working right now on a book of conversations. Okay, conversations with literary authors, discussing, conversing issues in the literary world, okay? All right, so let me tell you something about myself. I want to make 2 points. One, something about myself and explain how I arrived at the stage I am in today, intellectually, not academically. I don't believe in academia, okay? I'm retiring in 6 months. I will continue to do some part-time work, but I have been saying for the last 5, 6 years, I've also written on this, I think the academia is the most bureaucratic and dangerous institution in the world. I don't sit on the fence. What I have to say, I say. I hope I will not insult anyone. If I am insulting anyone, it is myself, because I have been in academia teaching since 1982. Okay? All right. But I haven't given up on the intellectual work. There's a huge difference between the intellectual and the academic. And I reflected on this distinction a while ago in 1994 in one of Bell Hooks' work, Teaching to Transgress, where she has a whole chapter where she actually deals with this important distinction. And that was a time when Bell Hooks had given up actually teaching in very prestigious universities in the US and made the move to start working as an independent author, okay, which is what she still does now. I didn't do that because I'm not as known as Bell Hooks, and my books don't sell as much, so I have to do some form of a living, okay? So, first point I will try to make. The second one is reflect a bit with you on different forms of research, okay? And you know what my view is? My view is that one of the most important forms, meaningful forms of research is dialogue and conversation itself in its embodied form. And unfortunately, this is the one which is least taken seriously in the academic world, but not in the intellectual world. If you look at the intellectual history of the world, both in the West and in the East, you will find that there are many intellectuals, and I'm including here literary figures, who actually write in dialogue form, okay? All right, so as Enrica said, I come from the island of Malta. I came to Canada when I was 23. Yes, wait a bit. Yes, I was 23, correct, 1977, to do a master's and PhD in philosophy at McGill, okay? And I taught at McGill, I taught at Dalhousie, Mount St. Vincent, Acadia, UBC, and here for the last 21 years. But you need to know something which has been extremely important, I think, in my intellectual development, and that is the fact that when I was 15 years old, I was kicked out of school because I failed all the standardized exams, and I was told in Maltese, Tayyip al-Khrouk. Maybe you would understand, Tayyip al-Khrouk, al-Khrouk, Khrouk, Harouk, Tayyip al-Khrouk. Good to be thrown into the fire. Okay? How do you say fire in Arabic? Nar. Ah, Tayyip al-Nar. Okay, the same, Tayyip al-Nar. And burnt, how would you say burnt? Ah, Harouk. Harouk, yeah, there you go. So I know Arabic as well, okay? So Harouk, burnt, to be thrown into the fire. Fawq fi nar. Okay, all right. That's what they told me, and I never completed school. I say no, thank God. Okay. So, but I made it to university, and I became a teacher, and so on, and then I came to Canada. Okay. Now. I was completely engulfed until 1982-84 in the analytic tradition in philosophy. Okay, a scholar of Wittgenstein, Frege, Carnap, Russell. You know, gosh, I can't believe I was doing that stuff. Okay, but it was really engaging, and it was very, very, very inspiring. Okay, Around 1984, around the time I was about to submit my thesis, I started changing in my thinking, and I did not want to submit my thesis. And the supervisor said, no, you've worked on it for 3 years, you have no choice, you have to do it. I'm glad he pushed me to do that. And that's where I got into critical work, okay? I started reading Paulo Freire and other critical pedagogues and feminist pedagogues. And then I got into post-structuralist work, not postmodern, post-structuralist work. And slowly, I came to the belief that the best way, I think, of creating meaningful change is more through literary texts rather than through the academic texts, okay? Like most of the things that I have written in my life. But in the last 10 years, I have really pushed myself in a positive way. It wasn't easy. I took workshops. You have to be very disciplined. I had to read a lot. I had to struggle a lot. I had to receive a lot of criticism about what I was writing, but that is fine, okay? And now I came to this conclusion that I think the literary work, I would venture to say, most probably is the best intellectual work that can help us move forward in researching, okay? I was always attracted to the idea of dialoguing, conversing, okay? I remember even as a child in school in Malta, which was still colonized the time I went to school by the British. And the curriculum was, and in my view, unfortunately, is still predominantly British, okay? Although we have been independent since 1964, of course, now we are suffering from another form of colonialism. We are full members of the EU. I was in favor also of Malta joining the EU, at the risk, of course, of being totally engulfed by the EU way of thinking, which I think is, from my angle of social justice and equity, is problematic, okay? And I have worked with the EU. 3 years ago, when Malta had the presidency of the EU, I was the chief policy advisor for Malta's Ministry of Education vis-a-vis the presidency on all educational policies. I went to Brussels 14, 15 times, negotiated all sorts of documentary deals with all the representatives of the 28 EU countries. I learned a lot, okay? I learned a lot, and I was solidified on this huge divide between North and South, okay? Amazing, anything that Malta would propose would immediately get almost automatic support from Italy, Cyprus, Greece, Spain, maybe France, and Portugal. The northern countries would start doubting and so on. But you know, it's one thing to read about it, it's another thing to experience it, and it's another thing to have conversations, real conversations with these people, okay? But I also was attracted to the idea of doing things. Of course, you do things intellectually as well, not only physically, both. And these were the two things I always struggled with in schooling, okay? You're not allowed to talk, you're not allowed to discuss. You have to write definitive forms of literacy. You know, the essay has to have the format. You have to answer this question in this box. I mean, gosh, my goodness, right? And of course, what happens is you become abnormalized and you start believing that you are abnormal. There's no other way about this, okay? And of course, all of this goes with the problem of the deficit mentality. And I think there is a lot of deficit mentality within the academia itself, absolutely within the academia itself. And I think one of the biggest deficits, I think, is that we do not take the literary and the dialogue and conversations as seriously as we should. That is my first point. I will end this with two short readings. One is a poem from my collection in English and French, published by a Canadian publisher, entitled Luggage Bagage, English with French translations. All my poetry collections, the 4 of them, are bilingual, okay? 3 of them are Maltese with English translations. This is with English and French. And now, last week, I had a collection of my poetry published in Greek in Athens. I will go in March for the book launch. And that is entitled, anyone knows Greek? No one knows Greek? I don't know Greek. Oh, agape, and the second part, you don't know Greek, Enrica?
Oh, I studied a lot of ancient Greek,
But you don't.
yeah.
So in English, it will translate as the loves of yesterday. Oh, agape, the loves of yesterday, I don't know. Okay, all right. So this is entitled, I Was Asked. I was asked, am I from Armenia or from Lebanon? Am I Spanish or am I Italian? Nobody noticed that I am Maltese. Shalom, are you by chance a Jew? Salam, are you a Muslim? How words and appearances deceive you. Perhaps my thick black hair, it was black. Or else that sculptured nose, that thick beard, it was thick. That accent, but am I Maltese? What a heavy accent you have got. Certainly, you are not Canadian. Do you mind showing us your passport? His worried gaze in my eyes, his tempting passport. How come you did not tell me you are Canadian? Okay, so, and the responses to this reading, to what I have said. You may need to come closer, you know, you're too far there. I can use my phone, okay? I can text you. Any responses to what I read?
Yeah, it was with my experience, like whenever I visit, so my passport says I'm Canadian, but I don't look like Canadian. And whenever I talk, oh, your English is good.
Yeah,
Speak
your English
well.
is good. Yeah. even today, I get.
Yeah.
Your English is good.
Yeah.
And then we have to explain, oh, we were colonized by the British, that's why. So we always have to explain that.
Yes,
That's actually,
you need to speak louder, right?
sorry, yeah, that's actually one of the things I like most about Italy. When I come here, I hear a lot of different accents, and it makes me feel like, okay, it's all right. I don't have to speak perfect English. Everywhere else, I get my accent. Here, it feels.
Because there are diverse accents.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to comment on the whole theme or the tone of the poem is very conversational.
Yes.
And of course that kind of, I think, grips the reader, and we're kind of with you, and then we visualize you, and then at the same time you're thinking all these things, oh, this is stereotype, this is judgment, this is, you know, and then at the end you're thinking, well, I probably do that too. So I think it's a very interesting vehicle that you wrote, and the message is very interesting, and I'm sure it took you a very long time to write it, but it seems like it flows very well.
Okay, why is it interesting? Now, this is a very dangerous word, and I'm not picking on you, sorry. Interesting is a very dangerous word. Okay? The Brits have ruined the meaning of the word interesting. Okay? Whenever I am at a conference in the UK or in the English-speaking world, and someone tells me, that's interesting, I start saying, okay, that's interesting. And I say, do you mean to say you don't get it? Or do you mean you say you disagree with me? All right? Because if something is interesting, you wouldn't say, oh, that's interesting. Because interesting is from 2 Latin words. Inter, which means among, and est, to be. So interest means it connects with my being. Now, I'm not saying you misused it, okay? But when you say this was interesting, it means, you know, this poem connects with your being, all right? That's how you meant it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting for me in that it was a different approach, and I was kind of with you. I wasn't sure where you were going with it. That's kind of what I mean. Like I was kind of on the journey with you briefly, and then the conclusion that I came to from the beginning to the end was surprising, and that's why I think it's a very good approach. It's kind of, I guess, showing, not telling.
It's the doing itself, you see? I mean, so all right, okay, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just off of that, it's interesting because it is relatable. Even I don't think it matters where you're from, because I think we can all relate to that. Like when someone ascribes a certain identity onto you, and even myself, like I was born in Canada and English is my first language, but the more I study other languages and teach English, people sometimes tell me I have an accent, and that feels really weird for me. But so like I say, even if I am Canadian, I'm kind of on the other side of that dialogue. I can still relate to it in the same way.
And of course, it's raised the issue what it is to be Canadian, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
You took the words right out of my mouth. What does a Canadian look like? What does a Canadian sound like? So it begs those questions. But it's interesting in the way that you describe it. Because it resonates because it resonates with me. I have been frequently asked in different settings for different reasons where you're from, and it's not a question that other people who don't look like me get asked. But in different parts of the world, people assume I'm American. And I vehemently defend that no, I am definitely Canadian. And we come in different hues, we sound differently, we look differently. So it begs that question, what does a Canadian sound like? What does a Canadian
The poem raises all sorts of issues with identity, of course, or identities, right? There was a hand up there, and then I'll take you here, yeah.
I wanted to say, it's like, as humans in this world, especially in the global world, and even before, we assume different identities. And it's not just so for example, I'm originally from India, and I live in Canada, and I also teach German. So every time I go into a German teaching classroom, the new class would look at me, I am definitely wrong in that. So it's and even as a Canadian citizen now, similar reactions. Like, oh, your English is so good. It's like your accent is not really important. Thank you. So it's almost like we have to always prove our belongingness to the different identities that we live every single day, and they're so closely a part of us. So your story reminded me of my different identities, and I feel like every second I have to pull out an ID card and prove it to people that I can do this. This is who I am also, and accept me for who I am.
And of course, I mean, there is a reason for documentary texts, right? ID cards are another kind of text, documentary text, right? Which is, in the schooling I went to, most of the literacy was documentary literacy and nothing else, right? But let me take these two and then I'll take you, yes?
I just wanted to add that it was very touching because it was very personal, and it seemed like it was very soulful. And I think that's what makes research interesting, because it's about storytelling, it's about personal and how it connects with other human beings because they experience the same thing. So that was a special thing.
Thank you. Yes. Rami.
So thank you, John. That piece was very relatable, and I apologize in advance. I was born and raised in the United Kingdom.
That's okay. That's
went
fine.
to Canada schooling, so when I was listening to your piece, it makes me think like I have an Indian background. Both my parents are from India. I was born and raised in the United Kingdom. So a lot of racism in the United Kingdom. Of course, you can never shed that in a place like that. And then coming to Canada with an English accent, and everybody who comes across me or has a conversation with me, the first thing they will say to me is, either they'll say, where are you from? That's an interesting accent.
It's a royal accent. Sorry.
And so you almost feel when people ask you those questions, you almost feel thirsty for being or having that accent. And so your piece was very relatable about regarding really understand exactly when I go through to the United States, when I cross the border, it's even worse for me because I'm a British passport, I'm not Canadian. So they look at me, it's already kind of the identity that they assume that we're where I may be coming from. And so then the cameras are on me, and then fingerprinting happens, and of course my name is not Canadian or British, and so I get this all the time.
Yeah,
but
it
it's
happens.
okay.
It happens.
It's fine.
It
Yeah.
happens. Thank you. I haven't forgotten you, but before I forget, I personally don't mind being asked where you come from or where are your roots from. That doesn't bother me at all. What bothers me at times is the context in which it is asked, okay? And because it makes it very, I mean, everything in the world is in some form or other political, but it becomes superbly political, right? And you're reminded of certain privileges or lack of them thereof.
Two comments. And the first one is I thought it was in the
Try
first
to
part.
speak up because
I'm moving because I
Sorry, yeah, I'm trying to speak louder. In the first part of the poem, I liked how there was still an intention of connection. And Shalom, are you? It's still, are you like me? It's not.
Yes.
It's not. Who are you? You're not. It's still. Are you like me? At least maybe in some of them. So I like that part. And in the second part where you or the person asks themselves a question, then there's kind of a reversal because by trying to find, like, well, what is it about me that makes me look something, and it kind of like what are maybe so black hair equals this, and it's kind of our own prejudices of like, so what about me could possibly make me look this and that.
What would make me look, or what make me being constructed in that way, right?
Yes.
Which are interlinked, of course. Yes. Were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I
again?
just wrote, like, I took the note, am I Maltese? So I think that there's also.
You are Maltese?
No, I'm just quoting you. Am I Maltese? It's kind of like question to yourself, so it's almost like a monologue at the same time.
And it is a true question. What is it to be Maltese? I mean, in the context of Malta today, in the last 20 years, Malta has had to, how shall I put it, accept, face lots of refugees and immigrants coming from the North African continent. But the racism, which has always been in Malta, has become rampant, absolutely rampant, right? And some of my friends who are not happy with these refugees and the new immigrants, they tell me, we have to remain pure Maltese. I feel like saying, using the F word literally, and I would be using it properly, okay? I mean, like, what does it mean to be pure Maltese? I mean, Portelli, when I go to Italy, everybody thinks I am Sicilian. It's a last name that has been in Malta from the 12th or 13th century, and it originates from Montreal, close to Palermo, the center of the mafia, okay? Because
but also the center of art. So.
Yes, center of art. Yeah, there is a huge marble Christ there. Okay, all right, okay. All right, one. Then I go to the Middle East, I just came 3 months ago from 10 days in the West Bank. I start speaking my Arabic and how I look and my accent. Ah, you are from El Basri, from Egypt. Oh, Lebanese, I mean, gosh. And then pure. I mean, what does it mean to be a pure Canadian or a pure Maltese, right? Now, my point is, look at this conversation. Now, let me ask the question. I today ask it rhetorically, but maybe I should not ask it rhetorically, but ask it in a more genuine way, okay? Open and what is best for me? To write an essay on these issues or to write a poem? My inclination, my conviction is I'm better off writing a poem than an essay. But I may be wrong, okay? And my point is, look at the dialogue that is created and the conversation. And I could push it more, we can have more, right? Maybe you want to write something. Maybe I give you a chance to write and then share your writing and we continue doing this. And where is the research? Well, the research, my argument is, in this actual conversation that we are having. What is elicited in your heart, in your mind, your souls, I mean, this is the heart of the research, okay? But we live in a world where we believe only in the product, okay? And therefore I have to publish it, and therefore, and so on and so forth, okay? And when that is overdone, and it has been overdone, then it becomes totally bureaucratic and totally rigidly like in rigor mortis. You know what rigor mortis means? Stiffness of death, rigor mortis, okay? It becomes a rigor mortis. And the academia, if we look at how it started in Fez, in Bologna, and so on, it was not rigor mortis. It was meant to be the life of the city, right? Let me read you now a short story on the same theme, okay? This is called Accents. And my new book, The Letter of Osama and Other Short Stories in Maltese, it will be translated in here. I have a whole other story called The Accent, and it's written, of course, in a fictional way, but I experienced that story. But now let me tell you another story. This is from the book called Everyday Encounters. All the short stories are not more than 500 words, okay? There is a brief introduction detailing the influence of Levinas on and the existentialism in my kind of writing, okay? But let's read. Accents. She left the school in a fury. Fury, you say, right? Fury. She could not take it any longer. She had lived in Canada for 20 years and was still a foreigner. What did I come here for? She grumbled. She stopped for coffee and cake before setting off to supervise a student teacher in another school. She had accumulated considerable experience both in her country and in Canada, and yet she felt anxious. After a year of study leave in Egypt, during which she had barely spoken a word of English, her accent appeared to have become more intense. Upon moving to Canada, her parents, on the school's advice, had spoken to their children exclusively in English. But Zara, the eldest of 5, had resisted. 1 o'clock, she perked up. The coffee had softened her mood. I'll give it another shot, she said to herself. She got to the school in Forest Hill, an affluent area. The parking lot was spotless. The trees lining the driveway were kept. The Canadian flag billowed from the top of a brand new pole. She smoothed her hair. She smoothed her hair, touched up her makeup, and got out of the car. The school's floor sparkled with cleanliness. A sign on the door read, "All visitors have to report to the main office." This was a new rule, a consequence of the spate of violent episodes that had occurred in some schools in recent months. She went to the main office. Okay, let me stop for a second or two to let you think of what may happen, okay? Imagine how you may continue the story, okay? Welcome, Dr. Saeed, said the secretary. I'm happy to meet you again. Thank you. How long have you worked here for? 6 months. It's a luxury compared to the school I worked in before. I need to see the grade 4 student teacher. You need to go upstairs. I'm supposed to give everyone a visitor's badge, but you don't. Thanks. No sooner had she stepped out into the corridor than a 9-year-old boy walked up to her. Sorry, you should be wearing a badge. Didn't you see the notice? Yes, I reported to the principal's office and was told I did not need one. You've been misinformed. You're not Canadian, are you? not with that accent. She replied angrily, "You have an accent too. Everyone does." And she stomped towards her classroom.
Very powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful. Why, Enrica? What do you find powerful?
Well, one of the reasons why I left the teaching of initial education is because in spite of 17 years of experience as teacher myself, and then many other years of teacher educator in service and pre-service, so all sorts of possible experience in different countries, in at least 3 countries, extensively, Italy, France, Canada, and then occasionally also Spain, Switzerland, England. I was never considered having the Ontario experience. So every time there was a kind of barrier, no? Like even with both the students and the colleagues and the entire group of what is now the Master of Teaching, it's like, yes, sure, you have that great experience, but it's not in Ontario. You were never a teacher in Ontario, as if being a teacher in Ontario were different than being a teacher in Italy or in France or in Spain or wherever you.
And there may be differences, but that doesn't mean you're not able to pick up on those differences.
Precisely, and I mean, if anything, it's a form of enrichment because you have all that other background and then you see and you can compare. Whereas if you were just there, you would not have an idea of how it works in other countries and how maybe you can transfer something. And that was really putting me off because there was no way of overcoming that because I didn't feel like trying, but it might have been a good idea to try and be a teacher in Ontario. But again, you didn't have the certification of OCT and all that, so you can't do that. You can go to a private school, but then they would say, "Oh yes, but it's a private school, it's a different story." See, so
there is always,
there is always something.
I used to be a middle school teacher in Malta for 2 years, but my certification is not valid. Okay. It was not done in university. It's okay. But I have been teaching in teacher education since 1982. I taught at McGill, at Dalhousie, at Acadia, Mount St. Vincent, summer school twice in UBC, and here. I mean, but I cannot teach in a school.
I have a similar experience with TESOL Ontario because I have all this experience from the States. I have masters from States everywhere. So all this Delta, Celta, whatever you have international, but yet I cannot teach LINC programs. I cannot teach CDSB schools because I'm not Ontario certified ESL teacher.
Yes.
Yeah, that related to me on 2 levels because the first half before you stopped us.
Yes.
Sorry.
What did you think?
Yeah. Well, first I was relating to it as like from my childhood, from when I was young and being a student myself, and then you enter the school and turns out, oh, you're actually the teacher, and I still related to that because I still get, raised in Canada, but don't look Canadian, so it's kind of reminded me that even though I've worked so hard and I have all this experience, who was saying, I still have to prove that I'm here, that I can be here.
Yes.
I wanted to comment. It was really nice and relatable for me as well. But I wanted to comment and also get your insights on the choice of neighborhood Forest Hill. Would it be different if you had chosen Riverdale?
I knew it may be controversial for choosing Forest Hills, but then I thought of, let's say, saying Clayton Park in Halifax where I lived, or I mean, almost any name I use could actually be a real one, right? So.
No, because when you said trees lined perfectly, I crossed that neighborhood and I could just see it in front of my eyes, and I passed through UCC often, and I just could see it all. I felt like being in the hallway, and maybe, you know, next year it's like, oh, what are you doing here? It's almost like nobody's saying that, but you hear that.
I have experienced, what are you doing here? And I've been called even on my accent. Now, I have been to hundreds and hundreds of schools in Canada, both through the research and supervision and all of those kinds of things. So this could have happened wherever, right? Yeah. I mean, it happens. It happens. And it happened to me once, and I was so mad. I told the student in the school, I said, as it finishes, I said, you do have an accent. How dare you? You know, I don't have an accent. I said, of course you have an accent. Anyone who talks has an accent. The question is not whether you have an accent, but what you make out of that accent. Yes.
Just to touch on the accents, you still see that today with students in schools who just arrive, and English may have been their first language, they may have been educated at an international school, but if they have that accent, the question of whether or not they should be in ESL, self-contained classes, still exists. And you see a lot of students actually being placed in ESL when they don't need to.
Well, my own children, 34 and 31, they still tell me to this day, when are you going to change your accent? I say, never. My accent. Sorry. Yes. Were you raising your hand?
I was.
Yes.
We are focusing on the way the child responded and the way it contrasts to the people just getting to accept them, which really it is on socialization. And little kids are very, very cruel when it comes to bullying people. They're very tribal.
Maybe, but of course, this is fiction. It's not meant as a, I mean, this is the difference between a sociological text or a political text or a philosophical text. Those are meant supposed to be the truth, you know, or the correct view or whatever. Here, in literature and fiction, you don't have that. It allows you to be in between. It allows you to roam in a variety of ways without feeling constrained. So I would say maybe the boy was correct. The secretary should have given the guest a label, right? She should not have made an exception. I mean, but maybe the secretary felt, you know, here is a professor, she doesn't need a label. I personally, if that happened to me, I would not feel comfortable. I would want to have a label on. But maybe I'm exaggerating. I don't know.
I don't think the problem is in the label.
The problem is not with the label.
No.
It's the accent at the end.
The problem is not.
That's what you were referring to.
I was referring to the lack of restraint on the child's part, because normally, even if you notice that has an accent, you can calm down on it. Or if they notice that they don't have a pass, a grown-up might assume, oh, okay, yeah, you're probably there, somebody probably dared you, but the child would call you out.
I also felt that the child was over aggressive for someone that he didn't know. Disrespect for not knowing the person. So that if somebody's parent.
But then they should still have had a label. There's a school policy. And maybe he's right. I mean, maybe this is someone who sneaked in, and who knows? I mean, it has happened. All right, you want to come in? I'll get you an Enrico. You speak louder. I'm here, but they're not. I know I'm older, so but still.
I will. So the mentioning of parents was very interesting because, my parents have never parents. And whenever we would go out in public, there's a element of like embarrassment not just that, it's like the emotions that are associated with having an accent. And I've experienced that too, living abroad and not having full like control of the language. And when you get angry, people don't take it as seriously, right? They think, oh, it's just like something, whatever. And then, you know, when I came back to my home in Canada, right, and I noticed that the face, it's like their anger is just like the same. It's just that, you know, for whatever reason, I feel this embarrassment. Or I used to feel it, right? Because of the way public appears to be. And because of that. Yeah, just that. That's where you.
Well, I passed because otherwise I'd be.
Of course, but that's okay. We always take time.
Yeah.
As long as we are around, we take time.
An entire list of things.
Okay. All right. So I hope I'm giving you some examples, all right, of what I mean by research as a doing and using the literary text itself as a doing, all right? I also do an exercise in some of my teaching classes. I think I did it in the last class you took, where I actually pass it. I start something with one line and it goes around and everybody keeps on adding a line to it. And it's incredible what emerges, right? There's a term for it. I don't know what you call it. There's a technical term. And we end up with a poem, okay, of some sort. Okay. So let me pause a bit. Now, I gave you those three readings. Do you have, and then I will move to other literary things if you want, okay? I have other things from. I can continue on this theme of identity, but I could switch to another topic. So if you look at those three readings, is there something you want to ask me since I'm here? Yes.
I had a question about something that was in the article.
Which one?
The Malta Today
The interview.
article, the interview.
Yes.
That maybe other students who are interested in the
That's
language
okay.
would
It's
like
one
to
of the
know.
readings. Yeah.
So, because one part you said something about choosing to write in Maltese.
Yes.
And you said something, it was like
Political
ideological.
statement.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could just share more like what you meant.
Sure. Maltese essentially, it is a Semitic language, like Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, Eritrean, and so on. It is the only Semitic language that is written in the Latin script. In other words, we use the same alphabet as in English, the Latin script. Okay. But the morphology and syntax is essentially Semitic. Okay. It's only spoken in Malta. The population in Malta is now close to 500,000. Right? Only small island. It's the most overpopulated area in Europe. Okay. And in some of the communities, they are the diasporic communities. Like in Toronto now, there are only about 18,000 Maltese. The first generation are almost passed away. And second, it's the language, speaking of the language in Toronto is dying. 40 years ago, it used to be taught in schools as well, after school, and there was those language programs. It's no longer the case. Okay. In Australia, there are more Maltese. There are about 70,000 now. But when I came to Canada in '77, there were close to 80,000 Maltese, of Canada. For Malta, that's a lot, proportion-wise, okay? And there is also a bias against Maltese in Malta itself, okay? To enter into university, if you are born in Malta, having Maltese at the ordinary level and in most of the, not all of the core programs at the A level, this is following the British system, ordinary level, A level, is still a requirement. And there are disputes. Some people say, well, this is a constraint, and all of those kinds of things, okay? Given all of this, I have always written any of the literary work I do in Maltese. Some I translate myself, some I hire professional translators to hire the language. That's what I meant by a political statement. And I'm stopped even, like, for example, I go to I'm involved in the Maltese community in Toronto. And some people say, oh, you speak Maltese, you are a professor, and you speak Maltese? And my reply is, exactly because I'm a professor, I speak Maltese, yes. But they think that it is odd. If you're working class, you speak Maltese. But to show you've made it, you forget Maltese and you speak English. And I cannot accept that. Okay. All right? Yes.
I also had a question based on the same interview. I think the interviewer asked you about the literary community within Malta.
Yes.
And you responded something about that there was a culture of us versus them.
Yes.
And a culture of elitism.
Yes.
So I guess I was wondering as I was reading it, what exactly that meant, and is that unique, do you think, to that place, or is that just typical of communities?
I thank you for your question. I don't think it is only a characteristic of a small island like Malta. No, of course. Having said that, I cannot deny there are characteristics that the Maltese exhibit, which I think are part and parcel of the psyche of small island people. Okay. And yet, that kind of elitism between authors, I have now that I'm talking more and more with Canadian writers, it exists as well. It exists also. I have several friends who are fine art artists. It exists also within the fine arts world. Okay? In the case of Malta, of course, Malta is small, and in my view, it is a pity that there is this kind of at times misconstruction, at other times, an attitude of arrogance by some authors towards other authors. Okay. Now, I think I also said in the interview, I do not deny that there are different things that are produced in the literary work in Malta, and obviously some is much better than others. Okay, but that is not a good reason why some authors should not communicate with other authors and give feedback and assist, right? There is a lack of a culture of criticism in the island, all right? There is. And my understanding of this goes back to the nature of schooling. Schooling is still geared towards passing closed book exams and nothing else. And this mentality will reproduce the uncriticalness of how students read, whether it is in schools or in universities. Okay. Which is a pity, really. Am I answering your question?
No, it was interesting because I think about these kinds of things a lot. I don't know if it's like a human condition that people are maybe competitive or insecure or something, but I was kind of wondering when I first read it, well, who's the us and them? Is it within the authors themselves? Is it within
what I meant it is within the authors themselves.
The authors themselves,
Okay. Yes, of course you can and you may. That's what we used to told in school. You know, have you ever been told you raise your hand, say, "May can I go to the bathroom?" And the teacher says, "You can, but you may not." Okay, all right. Yes, you may.
So my question is in regard to this article, like that you wrote with Sudan. Like it's usually when we study community like in language learning process sectors, and we always have negotiation.
Yes.
And then through negotiation, the identity will be reconstructed, negotiated between the person. here the focus is on hope and fear, and everything happens at sub-vocal level. And I don't know how they go to the process of the characters here go to the process of becoming, and how they like disrupt the identity that has been assigned to them. So is it just movement? Movement of places?
It is. The short answer is it is both movement of places, but also other movements in terms of roles that they perform. That's the short answer. Okay. Now, in a way, in relation to the abstract that I sent, and by the way, thank you for pushing me to do the abstract, because I want to write an article on this of some form. I'm trying to think how I could write it in a dialogue. Maybe not, maybe I just talk. Maybe I've said, I don't know, we'll see. Okay. But the point is, this article on Laila Lalami's novel, Hope and Other Dangerous Pursuits, which is a lovely novel. Okay, Raz, you remember that, right? I teach a course which I will be teaching again. Most probably it will be the last course I teach, of course, unless they hire me again to teach part-time. This May. It's called Narratives of Migration and Exile, Implications for Education. And we read 5 novels, okay? And then I give a lengthy bibliography with secondary sources. The students can read what they want. They can bring in the secondary sources, but not in themselves, only in relation to the literary text. So I am inverting, okay? I'm not saying those secondary texts are not important, but I'm saying for once, the literary texts are more important. These are the textbooks, okay? Novels, all that deal with migration and exile. And this was one. No. So we have the literary text, and then there is the textuality. Okay? The article, in some sense, is an example of the textuality that Suda and I constructed in relation to this novel. Okay? And Suda and I had lots and lots of conversations about this novel. And as a result of that novel, then we wrote it in this form. Okay? Now, my argument is that genuine, meaningful research happens in the relationship between the text and developing the textuality. Okay? Both of which are products. Okay? But the research happens in the doing. So in the case of writing literary work, the research happens in the actual activity of writing, rewriting, and reading and drafts, getting feedback, and so on. All right? And then, of course, you have the textuality where you construct, reconstruct, and so on. So am I?
Textualize the motivation or fear.
And we focused right on that aspect only. And we reread and reread the novel every time, looking for fear. Now we look for courage, and it becomes, you know. In some, let me put it this way. When you start analyzing in this way, frankly, you remove the fun of reading literary text, okay, if you overdo it. But in some ways, you know, you have to do it. You have to do it. I have done the same. I've done conceptual mappings, for example, of central texts of Paulo Freire, like Pedagogy of Freedom. I read it at least 100, 150 times, okay? And every time I come up with a conceptual map. But that is, that is fun. Okay. It's a pity he's dead because I cannot speak with him. But Laila Rami is still alive. Every now and then I communicate with her. She teaches out west in California. Okay. And she only writes in English. She doesn't write in Arabic. Okay. Which brings in another layer of identities as well. Okay. And of course, then there is the theme of nomadism. Okay. The nomadism with these main characters. I mean, without ruining the novel for those who want to read it. It is a novel that starts with a description of the migration or the traveling of 8 characters from the northern part of Morocco to the southern part of Spain, which is only about, what, 35 kilometers? Something like that. And she describes what happens. And then, no, there are 4 characters. I think 4 characters, yes. There were more people on the boat, but the novel is about 4 characters. And 3 of them managed to go to Spain, 1 was sent back. And then after that, what happens? Each character comes and talks about his or her life before migration, and then another chapter after migration. Okay, and that's where then, of course, the nomadism takes place. Now, but the nomadism takes place even with regard to that fellow who was not allowed to enter Spain, but was sent back. He imagined then all sorts of other things. And our argument is that they only managed to survive through this nomadic way of life. Okay, through this nomadic way of life, which only exists in the in-between. In the in-between. Just as I am arguing, research exists primarily in the in-between of the text and creating the textuality. All right? Now, coincidentally, my first collection of poetry is entitled In Between. Okay. All right? And the in-between for me was, I had a collection of poetry written before I came to Canada and a collection of poetry written after I came to Canada. So that for me was the in-between. I realize now at 65, I'm still in between and I will always remain. I have accepted it. But I'm a privileged nomad, unlike these characters. Okay. Huge difference. Yes?
Yeah, but still the nomadic identity, and in your article, this appears, I think, pretty clearly. It's not a status, it's not a temporary condition.
Yes.
Is a Dasein, you would say.
Yeah.
No, it's
a way of being.
It's really what you are, and it will, and it's the core of your own personality, which is not the right word, is really like the way you are in the world. Mm-hmm. No matter if you have how much you and how deeply you are and how realistically you changed places. No? It's because I think that you refer all the time, not to the person in the article and then in your argumentation, but this idea of becoming as opposite to the being, because being basically doesn't exist for is this something that
it's not in and of itself?
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that for us can be in those working languages can be extremely important, because you start thinking one of the main messages of Deleuze is that we always think of difference in relation to something that exists, different from something. You know? Whereas they say, no, difference exists by itself, not in relation to something. Because the moment you think difference in relation to something that exists, that is, you kind of diminish as well. It's different because. So it's a theoretical framework that can be very, very interesting for us in languages, because we have this kind of idea that a language and even the accent, no? That there is something from which we are different, because our variation of language is not the same as the language.
The norm. What the hell is the norm?
Our accent is different from. The moment you put yourself into this perspective, you are thinking of difference in relation to something that exists, or you imagine that exists, because there is not a real norm. Who said that that's the norm? who said that a Canadian needs to have a certain physical characteristics? I mean, historically, that couldn't be less true because, first of all, who is a Canadian? And of course, you know, but even in relation to languages, in relation to accents, in relation to even identity, you know. But there is this tendency to put people in little cases and to categorize. Exactly, to categorize everything. And it's what I liked in your poem is that a boy, a 9-year-old boy, feels the need. I mean, who cares if a person has a badge? You mean the short story? Yeah, the short story. Yes. Who cares if a person has a badge? I mean, it's none of your business. You're not the administration. So what? I mean, but probably. Maybe I feel guilty. I have to defend the young boy. Okay. But probably you were brought up to put things in neat categories, and so you feel a form of insecurity, or you feel entitled to say to somebody that they are not conforming. So it's this idea of non-conformity that is always challenged. Which needs to be unpacked. I mean, and once again, I would dare ask, what is best for me, to write an essay on this insecurity and identity and so on, or to write a short story? Today, I would say a short story is more effective. More effective.
I would say that that idea of in-betweenness is more poignantly addressed in the poem than it would be in any sort of essay that you could write.
Yeah, or in a novel or whatever. And then my novel, which will be published in English later this year, it's called Kulhat Bara Faiza. Maybe you understand that. All except Faiza. It starts with an incident that happens to Faiza, which is reported in the media in Toronto. It is a novel based in Toronto, okay? Immigrant life in Toronto. And something happens to Faiza. It is reported by the major newspapers, major TV stations, and major radio stations. This is all fictitious, of course. Maybe it happened somewhere, but I'm not documenting. And the reports all give a different tact of how to report this incident, and you could see their bias, right? So there is this construction of Faiza in the reporting. And then the rest of the novel is 8 characters who are related in some form or other to Faiza. Faiza ends up in hospital unconscious because of what happened, okay? And each character starts by saying something like, here I am in front of Faiza now. Had I not done this and that, Faiza would not be here. And then they tell us their story in relation to Faiza, okay? And we're always expecting Faiza to come, and Faiza never comes, and the story then never ends. So Faiza, which is supposed to be the main character, never comes. So I don't believe in main characters. I mean, they're all main characters. Did I say that in the interview? No, the interview that was another interview. And he says, so Faiza is the protagonist. I said, no, I don't believe in protagonists. All of them are protagonists, if you will, because Faiza would not have existed without the relationship that they all had, and vice versa, right? So they're all in the, and that is the novel. So I won't tell you how it ends. You had another question or comment? Sorry.
I wanted to ask about using novels in the course you were telling us about, and I was wondering if you have sort of a stable set of 5 novels, or if it shifts each time you teach the course, and if it is stable, what are the 5 novels?
The two times I taught the course, I used the same 5 novels, and there are 2 novels by Laila Lalami. Hope and Other Dangerous Pursuits, and the other one is called The Sun in the City. No. I'll find it. And then there are 3 novels by Tahar Ben Jaloun, also a Maghrebi novelist from Morocco, award-winning also, but who writes only in French, okay, and lives in Paris. I don't agree with his reasoning for writing in French, but that's a different story. And those novels are Palace in the Village, Leaving Tanger, and The Last Friend. Or no, The First Friend, I think it's called The First Friend. All dealing with migration of the friends, different source of migration. Now, my second point was that there are different forms of research. I hope. Sorry. Yes, of course.
I have 2 questions.
Yes, please.
It's quite evident that you have a talent.
I have a talent.
Yes, you're very talented. So my question is, I've been a teacher, an English teacher in Mexico for more than 20 years. I've never used poems or literary because I don't feel it's not my
cup of tea.
I like it. I enjoy it. It has an impact on me, but I don't feel comfortable as use it as a pedagogical tool. So that's my question.
Thank you for being honest.
I don't feel comfortable. For example, I use music in my classes, but I'm very aware of the impact just now that we had. Even if we didn't all speak, there was an impact that's something that we're going to remember for years, this specific session. So my question is, I'm not sure if how do we harness that ability to use that tool if we don't have that background?
The short reply is, you have to be courageous enough to experiment.
Okay.
And to experiment, you have to experiment first in places or contexts where you see safe. If you're teaching in a school with a principal and many colleagues who believe only in one way and nothing else, it would be more difficult, okay? But you can always try something minimal, right? Maybe you could try haiku. Haiku are 3 poems, Japanese meditative poetry, with 3 lines only, okay? There are 2 kinds. Anyone knows about haiku? There are 2 kinds. There is a haiku, which deals with nature, and in the Japanese tradition, haiku, nature does not include human beings, okay? But there is also senryu, which is same form and intent of haiku, but the focus is human beings. Okay? So, I published haiku as well.
We have here a colleague.
There you are. Okay.
You know much better than I do.
So you know the famous poem haiku of the frog leaping in the water? Yeah. Okay, all right. But a senryu of mine that I use in discussions and so on, and I tell you, long discussions, heated discussions, is this short senryu, okay? I will read it. Marketed man, so enchanted by rigor, even rigor mortis.
So enchanted by
rigor, even rigor mortis. Marketed men, so enchanted by rigor, even rigor mortis. Sorry?
The person is like commodified?
Commodified, marketed, yes. People like myself, I'm a marketed man. If anything, I'm critiquing myself, you know.
That word, rigorous, I forgot.
Rigor mortis, stiffness of death. After we die, they say in half an hour or so, we become very stiff, okay? So, I say it again, marketed men, so enchanted by rigor, even rigor mortis. Technically, it should be 5, 7, and 5 syllables. But nowadays, many poets don't follow that. I have seen haiku, even 1 line. But the Japanese idea was 5, 7, 5, because the haiku is supposed to be expressed in one breath. And according to the classic Japanese haiku theory, one breath is equivalent to 17 syllables. 17 syllables. Okay. I took lots of workshops. 10 years ago, I did not write anything except haiku and senryu. Only it was very, very constraining in the beginning, the first month. Nothing, just haiku and senryu. And I would meditate every morning and read haiku and, you know, I'm privileged. I could afford it, right?
Can I ask a question?
You can and you may, yes.
Why the writer used machine, like machine for desire? Machinations and machines and social machines and desire. Why the word machine?
For desires?
Yeah, for desire.
I used it?
No, Deleuze.
Deleuze.
Why?
Oh, well.
This metaphor is for
machine for desires.
Yeah, desire producing machines, social machines.
I thought social machines and desires are opposites, no?
Can you read the passage?
Yes, find it. Sorry. I have the article here. I got it just in case. What page are we here?
I don't know, maybe I watched YouTube or somewhere or some before some articles.
Talking about nomadic war machines? Nomadic war machines?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's on page 675.
Page what, sorry?
675.
675? Mine says pages 1, 11.
Maybe 12.
Which paragraph is it?
Second paragraph.
Second paragraph. 1.
This is in
To
this
identify
space.
the language through which Lanami's novel is read. That's what you mean?
It says nomadic war machines are social organizations that counter state orthodoxy and resist control from all directions while becoming sources of leakage and potential forms of existence.
I have to see it.
It's towards the end, you know?
Towards the end?
It's the second paragraph.
Second paragraph.
The second paragraph
Yeah, it is in
of the
this
article?
space that
No,
nomadic
page 675.
No, but I don't have page 675, sorry.
That's why it's not finding.
Okay, let me use yours. That's fine.
So it's like page 10, page 10.
Page 11, I think.
10, 11, yeah,
Somewhere around there.
11,
Page
page 11, yeah, page 11.
Page 11, and the paragraph starts?
2. It is in this space.
It is in this space that the nomadic war machine emerges. It is in this space that the nomadic war machine emerges as the imminently organized mechanic assembly that is not tied to a central power structure. Nomadic war machines are social organizations, that counter state orthodoxy and resist control from all directions. Yeah. So it is a metaphor. So nomadic war machines are social that counter state orthodoxy. That's the metaphor he uses. And resist control from all directions, while becoming sources of leakage and potential forms of resistance. Leakage, namely like a rupture, There's a rupture. So in the short story, the professor who was visiting the school telling the boy, you have an accent too. All right, that's a leakage, that's a rupture, So it would be like an almost, it's not to lose words, but almost like an anti-establishment move, you understand, All right. Now, those ruptures, they create uncertainty, of course, but these characters are always in those ruptures. And it is through those ruptures that they conquer their fear and courage to move on. And that is associated, of course, with their nomadic existence, but also our interpretation, Sudha and I, is that they move forward because they endorse now the nomadic life. Before they physically try to escape from Morocco, they were always in one box and nothing else, okay? And nothing else.
But when they go back, like the woman, no? When they go back, they are no longer the same.
They are no longer, absolutely, they are no
box.
longer the same. And this is a connection with another novel you asked, The Palace in the Village, which is about this major character, Mahmoud, who goes to France since he was 16, lives his entire life there. And of course, every time he goes back, he sees his country differently. And yet his ideal is when he retires to build a big house in the little village where he grew. And he builds this palace in the village. And he invites all his children and their relatives to go. He waits for them for a week and they never go. And he dies in front of this house out of desperation. And of course, the dying in front of the house, for me, is a metaphor also of what happens.
No, he dies inside the house.
Inside the house, but he sits in front of the house, no?
He sinks into the sofa.
Yes, he sinks into the sofa with the sun on him, no?
Yeah, it becomes like a miracle.
Yeah. But he had spent a lot of time outside waiting on the chair, and then he actually dies inside. You are correct.
Can I ask you, what is your connection to Morocco? Is there any personal connection?
No, there isn't. I have been to Morocco 7 times. I did some work with a university as a consultant. Al Ahwain, the two brothers university in the Middle Atlas Mountains. And I went to Azru, but I had already started writing. It took me 7 years to feel comfortable. Where is he? Where is the Madame of Portelli? It took me 7 years reading these novels and reading extra stuff before I felt comfortable to offer a course.
Yeah, that's a long story.
Okay.
Yeah, there's another.
Yes.
I wanted to reflect a little bit more on this idea of nomad. Do we actually have to, not we, but it's the geographical move. Because one can feel like that even without having moved just.
It is not necessary, no. Yeah. It is not, and I thought someone asked me that. Well, no, it is, in my view, it isn't necessary. It isn't necessary. The move can happen metaphorically also, and you never change the country, right? We have most probably one of the most famous Maltese authors, deceased now, playwright called Francis Hebert, who came from the same small village where I grew up in. I mean, he moved from the village and moved somewhere else. He lived all his life except for 2 years when he was a reporter in North Africa with Reuters, I think. But I always interpret his work as being a nomad in his own country.
However, it's a bit more difficult. I mean, you can do that, but
it's more difficult.
For example, literature is, in that case, is an enormous help to shape a nomadic identity.
Of course.
Within the same place, because you experience other lives and other cultures.
Of course.
But
he traveled a lot, but he never actually migrated. He always lived in the country, in the same country.
Or literature, digital resources can take us to past and present, different spaces.
It is 6:30.
Yeah, but you go to take a little bit more time to go to your other point.
Okay, my other point, then I want to read another poem and then I'll stop, I think. The other point is different forms of research, okay? So, well, of course, there is empirical research where we collect data, whatever that means, collect data. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do empirical research. I have done it. I'm leading another Ontario-wide study on the equity policy, okay, the implementation of the equity policy. And policy document analysis with its surveys. Now we're moving to interviews. So, I mean, it is okay. I There is, of course, philosophical research, which is a completely different other form. There's historical research, and within the empirical, there are many different other forms. Okay. I find it extremely colonial move within the academy. When colleagues tell me, if you don't collect empirical data, you're not doing research. Okay. It is absolutely the most profound telling colonialist move. Okay. Absolutely, absolutely. Please, there are many other forms of research in the world besides empirical research. Okay. You keep on saying that only empirical research is true research is really a reproduction of old-fashioned positivism that believes that meaningful statements are either tautologies, which tell us nothing. John is identical to John. A triangle is a figure with three sides. Or statements where you make a claim between a subject and an object. And therefore, you have an empirical statement. Okay? This table is hard. Nothing else. The literary, the philosophical, the historical, the spiritual, the religious, all of those are utterly nonsense. Okay? This is the root of positivism, which goes back to the 17th century. Okay? And takes its climax in texts like Language, Truth, and Logic by Sir Alfred Ayers, Ayers. Okay? It's a problem. And this kind of positivism is a remnant of old-fashioned colonialism. There is only one form. It has worked for the colonizer, and all the colonized have to do it, or else they are not truly human. They are still uncivilized. Whew. Absolutely dangerous. Absolutely dangerous. I will repeat. I am not saying it is not worthwhile to do empirical work. If you look at my record, I have done many empirical studies. But to say that the only meaningful research is the empirical one is the most colonizing statement one can make. And then people say, so what are other forms? And this is what got me a long time ago, trying to look at research as a form of dialogue. Now, of course, dialogue is dangerous. It is dangerous because there are certain conditions that have to be met. Okay? The article with Carol McGuinness, she researched two prominent researchers at the time in the literacy world in the US, one believing in so-called whole language, and the other one not believing in whole language. And they were not talking with each other at all. And she managed to get a series of conversations between them. Okay? And that dialogue itself, we are arguing, is the research itself. Okay? Now, all right. What is absolutely needed for genuine dialogue is that both sides need to be open to move and to stand, to accept self-critiques and to be genuine and have an open, inquiring mind. Okay? And I have learned through experience that there is no point of having dialogue with people who pretend to be open, and then you realize they are not open, and then you open your heart with them, and then they misuse it for their own ends. Okay? I'm not a diplomat, but this happens a lot in the diplomatic world. Okay?
Can you give an example of this?
Okay, so look, I used to have a colleague who has written and argued that equity and leadership have nothing to do with each other. Okay. Can I dialogue with this colleague? Very serious, very serious, okay? Very serious. When I was in administration, okay, I was once called into a meeting with representatives from the government, Ministry of Education. This was during the conservative era still. We were not notified, this was here at OISE. We were not notified that this person was being invited. It was sort of like a think tank on literacy and so on and so forth, what I think it was. And then we're told, you know, speak your minds, it's okay, you have to be free. Yeah. I'm sorry, BS. First of all, you didn't tell us, okay? Secondly, I'm construed by the ministry as the crazy guy because I believe in equity, okay? And you want us to have a genuine conversation, okay? And I went to speak to the other administrator who was in charge of this meeting, and I said, look, this is completely unacceptable. And the person replied and said, well, no one told you not to speak, okay? I said, look, I have my resignation right here, bye-bye. No more that. There is no point of dialogue here. No point of dialogue. There is no honesty. There is no integrity. There is no openness. Okay. Is that good? Is that okay as an example? I'm writing another novel, by the way, now. I'm 3/4 through.
On your title, administration?
Yes. And the novel will be entitled The University Mafia. It's fictitious, of course. There are characters, there is a romance, and I can say whatever I want. They cannot fire me. Sorry. The literature gives you this freedom, no? It gives you the freedom. It gives us the freedom that students need. I think. It gives us the freedom. I want to end with one poem, if I may. What about this guy here? Hey, Reza!
Lisa, do you have any questions?
Poor fellow, I forgot him. He's always seeing my bald head. Yeah.
4 a.m., 5 a.m.
He's gone?
But it's the time difference. It's really early.
Yeah.
8 hours?
Yeah.
Mostly 3.
What time?
3 a.m. now.
3 a.m.
3 a.m.?
3.
Wow, you're a night owl.
Yes, it's 3 a.m.
So
Do you have any questions or comments, Reza?
Really interested.
Hey, any questions or comments?
No, thank you. Thank you.
You know what my name is, eh?
Exactly, I know.
You know my name?
Sure.
I have a Farsi name, Khalid Devane. Veramente pazzo. Truly crazy. I know it in 40 different languages. I still learn, you know. Polish, is there someone Polish? Sure. I won't go into that. Raz knows them all, right? To get an A, you have to know all these words in my opinion. Okay, I will read 2 poems. This is from this past year. I went to the West Bank and to Israel twice. Okay, I spent 8 days in Haifa. I spent 10 days in Bethlehem, and given talks here and there. So, 2 of them. One of them is called "Here Used to Be," and we drove from Baka al-Arabiya to Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and then went to Bethlehem, always driving along the wall. Okay, there are 2 highways. One of them, the highway. We took the highway along the wall. So here used to be. As you drove on the highway, I overheard your soul crying. Green tears trickle along the wall that unjustly divides. Here used to be a Palestinian valley. Here used to be a Palestinian village. Here used to be a Palestinian city. Here used to be a Palestinian orchard. Here. And today, a nation erased, engulfed by rectangular concrete structures. Slowly, we entered Al-Quds, and you let your hair down, out of which trickled olive oil. Ramallah. Before I departed, you presented me with a lemon. This lemon from Ramallah is sweet and nourishing. Its fragrance is enticing. Its color overwhelms me. Its taste spares me. Its shape unperturbed in the palm of my hand. And your eyes, Nazar, your eyes every day drip tears of blood, waiting for this venom to vanish. Come to think of it, perhaps I should end one about Canada, Quebec City. Okay, Quebec City. Are you ready? Are you ready? Quebec City, capital city of Quebec, La Belle Provence. My first home is Montreal, okay? So, 6 dead in shooting at Quebec City Mosque, 2 men arrested. CBC, 30 January 2017. Allahu Akbar, hailed the muezzin. God is great, you whispered in the stillness of the mosque. As blood dripped from the pig's head, hate brought to your door. Bon appetit marched on the wall, their swastika of intolerance. Allahur Rahman, you spoke in unison, soul pried away by colonial clemency, concealing your identity beneath a scarf that masks and unveils and masks. Allahul Kareem, but where is the mercy? Christians claim for themselves. Tattered by the bullets, thus perishes the peace of your prayers. Drained are your hearts, disturbed your communion. There you lay slain. There, in an icy Quebec City, robbed of bread, lifeless, so much for liberté, égalité, fraternité. Je me souviens, you rightly retorted. What of La Belle Provence? Never had those words meant less. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. If you have anything else, we can continue the conversation. I have my email, john.portelli@crazy.com and toronto.ca. If it's where at crazy.com, no one will forget it, right? Thank you, Enrica.
There are a lot of give us a rich input, food for thought, as one said, and even for soul, I think.
Sorry.
Reason.
Soul exists?
Soul exists?
I know, yes. Psyche.
So this is the course we offer.
The course, when I teach it.
It's a philosophical answer.
No, it's a crazy answer. It's tautology. May and June.
Yeah.
Yes, who's the
Yeah, we've done the social justice.
Whatever you like.
Yeah.
Okay, take our break.
Take a break, break something.
Sounds good though.
I need to put this in my bag. So.